The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the bustling sports complex. Excitement buzzed in the air as spectators gathered, their chatter mingling with the sounds of athletes warming up. Among them was Malik Johnson, a determined young man with dreams bigger than his circumstances. As he adjusted the straps on his racing shoes, he could feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders, both from his family and the community that had supported him through every hurdle. Malik had trained tirelessly for this regional track competition, his sights set on the state finals. His mother, a single parent working two jobs, had sacrificed so much to ensure he had the opportunity to run. Each stride Malik took on the track echoed the sacrifices she made. He was not just running for himself, but for her as well. His coach, Mr. Davis, a seasoned athlete turned civil rights lawyer, had been a guiding light through his journey. With each session, Mr. Davis instilled in Malik not only the techniques of sprinting, but also the importance of integrity and justice. As the whistle blew, signaling the start of the 100-meter dash, Malik's heart raced in anticipation. The crowd roared as he took his position at the starting line, glancing at his fellow competitors. They were all worthy challengers, but Malik felt ready. He had visualized this moment countless times, imagining himself crossing the finish line first, arms raised in victory. But this time, there was a cloud of uncertainty hanging over him. The race began, and with the sound of the starting gun, Malik launched forward, his legs propelling him with a rhythm honed through years of practice. The wind whipped past his face, and the world around him blurred as he focused on the finish line. He could hear the cheers of the crowd growing louder, spurring him on. Each stride felt powerful, and for a moment, he believed he could outrun any doubt. As he neared the finish, Malik pushed himself harder, feeling invincible. But just as he crossed the line, a sudden silence enveloped the arena. The referee, an imposing figure with a stern expression, raised his hand. Confusion swept over Malik as the official signaled for him to step aside. Disqualified, the referee bellowed, his voice cutting through the stillness. You stepped out of your lane. Malik's heart sank. He looked around, searching for understanding in the faces of spectators and fellow competitors. They seemed just as bewildered as he was. He hadn't stepped out of his lane. He had followed every rule, executed every stride with precision. As whispers of disbelief rippled through the crowd, he could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, a mix of anger and humiliation washing over him. Wait, what? That can't be right. Malik protested, confusion turning to desperation. He glanced at Mr. Davis, who stood at the sidelines, his face a mask of shock and concern. Mr. Davis had seen countless races and knew the rules inside out. He recognized the injustice unfolding before his eyes. Malik, don't worry, Mr. Davis called out, stepping forward. Let's get to the bottom of this. As the referee walked away, dismissing Malik's protests, Mr. Davis approached him, his eyes filled with determination. We need to talk to the officials. This isn't over yet, he said, a firm resolve in his voice. I've seen bias in sports before, and I won't stand for it. Malik nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude for his coach. Mr. Davis had been more than just a mentor. He was a fierce advocate for justice, both on and off the track. They hurried to the officials' tent, where other coaches and athletes were gathering, murmurs of disbelief circulating among them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Coaches were arguing, some in disbelief at the referee's decision. Mr. Davis made his way to the head official, a middle-aged man with a clipboard. We need to discuss Malik Johnson's disqualification, he said, his voice steady but urgent. This is a clear case of bias. The official frowned, glancing down at his notes. He stepped out of his lane. It's against the rules. Against the rules? Mr. Davis replied, his voice rising slightly. You can't be serious. There's no evidence to support that claim. I've been watching Malik for years. He wouldn't risk disqualification by stepping out of his lane. As the argument unfolded, Malik stood to the side, anxiety gripping his stomach. The voices around him rose and fell like a storm, but he could barely focus on the words. Instead, he replayed the race in his mind, desperate to find the moment where everything had gone wrong. Had he really stepped out? In that moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a disqualification. He could sense the underlying tension in the air, an uncomfortable truth that often lingered in competitive sports. As the discussions continued, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him, the legacy of athletes who faced discrimination, not just in the arena, but in every facet of life. Malik, stay strong, Mr. Davis said, turning back to them after a heated exchange with the official. We'll fight this. We have to. Malik nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his heart. He had always known that pursuing his dreams would come with challenges, but he never imagined that something like this would happen. As they left the official's tent, he glanced back at the track, the place where he had felt so powerful just moments before. Now it seemed like a battleground, a stage where justice and injustice played out in the most public of arenas. The crowd had thinned, but Malik could see a few familiar faces in the stands, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. He felt a rush of anger. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. This was for everyone who had ever been wronged in their pursuit of greatness. As he and Mr. Davis made their way out of the complex, Malik's determination solidified. He would not let this moment define him. With a coach like Mr. Davis by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did he know, this incident would not only ignite a fight for his own justice, but would also shine a light on a much larger battle against systemic racism in sports. And with that thought, Malik took a deep breath, steeling himself for the journey that lay ahead. The day after the race, Malik woke up with a sense of heaviness settling in his chest. The morning sunlight poured through his window, illuminating the trophies on his shelf, symbols of hard work and perseverance. Yet this morning, they felt like distant reminders of a victory that had been stolen from him. As he sat up in bed, the events of the previous day replayed in his mind like a relentless loop. He could still hear the referee's voice, the shock of disqualification echoing in his ears. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence. It was a text from his mother. "How are you doing, honey? I'm so proud of you, no matter what." Her unwavering support brought a slight smile to his face, but it was quickly overshadowed by frustration. He wanted to be proud of himself, too, but the sting of the referee's decision felt like a dark cloud hanging over him. As he got ready for the day, Malik's thoughts turned to Mr. Davis. His coach had been more than just a mentor. He was a pillar of strength and a beacon of hope. Malik remembered the fiery determination in Mr. Davis's eyes as they had left the complex. He had promised to fight this, and Malik needed to trust that his coach would not let the injustice slide. After a quick breakfast, Malik headed to Mr. Davis' office, a small space filled with legal books, framed photos of civil rights leaders, and memorabilia from his athletic days. The walls told stories of struggle and triumph, reminding Malik that he was not alone in this fight. He entered to find Mr. Davis hunched over his desk, reviewing papers with a furrowed brow. "Malik, come in," Mr. Davis said, looking up with a mixture of concern and determination. "I'm glad you're here. We have a lot to discuss." Malik took a seat across from his coach, his heart racing. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday. It feels so unfair. I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, and that's why we're going to fight it," Mr. Davis replied, leaning forward. "But we need to be strategic. First, we need to gather evidence. Witnesses, video footage, anything that can support your case." Malik nodded, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I spoke to a few people after the race. Some of the athletes saw what happened. They said it didn't make sense." "Good. We need their testimonies," Mr. Davis said, pulling out a notebook. "Let's start reaching out to them. I also want to talk to the parents and other coaches who were there. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about exposing the bias in our system." As they worked together, the frustration Malik felt began to transform into resolve. With each conversation they had, he could feel the weight of injustice slowly lifting. They drafted emails to fellow athletes and parents, hoping to gather as many accounts as possible. With Mr. Davis leading the charge, Malik felt emboldened. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings. Malik spoke with several other competitors who had witnessed the incident, sharing their disbelief and anger. Many expressed their support, recalling moments when they, too, felt sidelined by a system that seemed stacked against them. One athlete, Sarah, a sprinter from a nearby school, shared her experience of being unfairly penalized in a similar situation last year. It's like they're looking for any excuse to take us down, she said. We have to stand together. As they gathered testimonies, Malik began to realize that he was part of a larger narrative, one that encompassed countless athletes who had faced discrimination. The more he learned, the more he felt a sense of responsibility to represent them. With each call, the community rallied behind him, fueling his determination to seek justice. However, with each passing day, the emotional toll weighed heavily on him. Malik found it difficult to focus on anything other than the upcoming hearing. He had always loved running, but now it felt tainted by the incident. The once exhilarating prospect of competing now loomed like a dark shadow, a reminder of the unfairness he had experienced. During one of their meetings, Mr. Davis noticed Malik's struggles. You're carrying a lot of weight on your shoulders, Malik. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, he said gently. But remember, you're not alone in this. We're fighting for more than just your race. We're fighting for all those who felt the sting of discrimination. Malik looked up at his coach, feeling the warmth of his words. I just want to run, coach. I don't want this to define me. It won't, Mr. Davis reassured him. But you have a chance to make a difference. This isn't just about your future. It's about creating a better environment for everyone who comes after you. We can't allow this injustice to continue. As the days turned into weeks, news of Malik's case began to spread beyond their local community. Social media buzzed with support, hashtags like hashtag Justice for Malik gaining traction. Stories of other athletes who faced similar biases began to surface, creating a collective voice calling for change. Malik watched as his story reached wider audiences, realizing the power of social media in amplifying their cause. But with the increased attention came scrutiny. Critics emerged, questioning Malik's credibility and motives. Some suggested that he was overreacting, that the referee's decision was simply a mistake. Malik found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, anger at the unfairness and sadness at the division it caused within the community. People will always have their opinions, Mr. Davis reminded him one evening as they reviewed feedback from their social media campaign. What matters is the truth and your willingness to stand for it. Determined not to let negativity deter him, Malik continued to focus on the upcoming hearing. He felt a growing sense of purpose, knowing that this fight was bigger than himself. He started to prepare not just for the legal battle, but also for the emotional challenges ahead. Each time he laced up his racing shoes, he reminded himself of the countless athletes who had come before him, those who had faced similar struggles. As the hearing approached, Malik found solace in his training sessions. He ran with a renewed intensity, each lap around the track a declaration of his resilience. The rhythm of his feet hitting the ground became a meditation, a way to channel his frustrations and fears into something tangible. On the eve of the hearing, Malik gathered with Mr. Davis and a few of his supporters at a local park. They shared stories, laughter, and tears, reinforcing the bond they had built throughout this journey. Malik felt a warmth in his heart, a sense of belonging that reminded him why he started running in the first place. Tomorrow is going to be tough, but remember, we're all in this together, Mr. Davis said, raising a glass of lemonade in a toast. To resilience, to justice, and to a brighter future for all athletes. As the group clinked their glasses together, Malik felt the fire igniting within him. No matter the outcome, he knew he had the support of those who believed in him. With a sense of determination coursing through his veins, he vowed to face the challenges ahead head-on. Little did he know, the battle for justice was just beginning, and the road ahead would test not only his resolve, but the strength of a community united against discrimination. The day of the hearing dawned with a palpable sense of tension in the air. Malik stood before the mirror in his small bedroom, adjusting his tie for what felt like the 100th time. His palms were slick with sweat, and he could feel the weight of the world resting on his shoulders. The stakes had never felt higher, and he couldn't shake the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. Malik, are you ready? His mother's voice cut through his thoughts, pulling him back to reality. She stood at the doorway, concern etched across her face. You've got this. Just remember to breathe. He turned to her, forcing a smile. Yeah, I'm ready. But as he looked into her eyes, he felt a swell of emotions, fear, determination, and an overwhelming desire to prove that he was more than just a disqualified athlete. He was a voice for those who had been silenced. After a quick breakfast, they drove to the courthouse, Malik's heart racing with every passing moment. The streets, usually bustling with life, felt eerily quiet as they approached the building. Malik could see Mr. Davis waiting outside, his presence instantly calming. He wore a crisp suit, exuding confidence and authority. Malik, you look sharp, Mr. Davis said, clapping Malik on the shoulder. Let's go in and get this started. As they entered the courthouse, Malik was struck by the weight of the place. The high ceilings, polished marble floors, and rows of wooden benches created an atmosphere of seriousness that made him acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. He felt a mix of intimidation and resolve as they made their way to the hearing room. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Several other athletes and coaches had gathered, their expressions a blend of support and concern. Malik recognized some of them from the track, and their presence reassured him. They were all here for the same reason, to stand against injustice. The hearing was set to begin, and Malik took a deep breath as he and Mr. Davis sat at the front. The head official, a stern-looking woman named Judge Parker, entered the room and called the session to order. We're here today to review the disqualification of Malik Johnson from the regional track competition, she announced, her voice echoing off the walls. I expect decorum and respect from all parties involved. Malik sat up straight, feeling the weight of the moment. He was ready to fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who had faced similar discrimination. Mr. Davis leaned over and whispered, Remember, stay calm. We're here to present the truth. The first to testify was the referee, a tall man named Mr. Collins. He approached the stand, his demeanor defensive as he recounted the events of the race. I made the call based on what I saw. Malik stepped out of his lane, and that's against the rules, he stated, avoiding eye contact with Malik. Can you explain what you mean by stepping out? Mr. Davis asked, his tone steady. What evidence do you have to support this claim? Mr. Collins shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I just know what I saw. It was a judgment call, he replied, his voice lacking conviction. Was there any video footage of the race that might clarify your decision? Mr. Davis pressed, a glimmer of hope lighting up in Malik's chest. No, I don't believe there was, Collins stammered. The tension in the room thickened, and Malik could feel the eyes of the audience on him. This was his moment to reclaim his story, and he needed to make it count. Next, Malik's coach called witnesses to the stand, athletes and coaches who had witnessed the race. One by one, they recounted the incident, each testimony painting a clearer picture of what had transpired. Sarah, the sprinter who had shared her experience with Malik, spoke passionately about the injustice of the referee's decision. We all saw it. Malik ran his race cleanly, and this disqualification is a reflection of bias in the system, she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. As each witness spoke, Malik felt a swell of support surrounding him. They were all standing together, united against the tide of discrimination. He could see his mother in the audience, her face proud and resolute. The strength of their community fueled his determination. When it was finally Malik's turn to take the stand, his heart raced. Mr. Davis gave him an encouraging nod as he approached, and he could feel the weight of every eye in the room on him. Taking a deep breath, Malik steadied himself. Mr. Johnson, can you recount the events of the race from your perspective? Judge Parker asked, her gaze focused intently on him. Malik cleared his throat, recalling the exhilarating moments leading up to the disqualification. I trained hard for this race. When the gun went off, I ran my heart out. I've never stepped out of my lane in my life, he stated, passion igniting his voice. I know what I saw, and I know what I did. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a deliberate act of discrimination. As he spoke, he could feel the energy in the room shift. The audience was captivated by his honesty and conviction. He continued, I believe this decision was influenced by my background. I've seen how athletes like me are often treated differently, and I refuse to let this go unchallenged. His words hung in the air, resonating with everyone present. Malik glanced at Mr. Davis, who nodded, pride evident in his eyes. The support of his community felt like a shield against the forces trying to undermine him. The cross-examination began, and Mr. Collins returned to the stand. Mr. Johnson, you claimed this was a deliberate act of discrimination. Can you provide any evidence to support that assertion? He asked, his tone condescending. Malik took a deep breath, prepared for the challenge. The evidence is in the patterns we see in sports. I'm not the first athlete from a marginalized background to face discrimination, and I won't be the last. We need to look beyond just this incident. The tension in the room crackled as Malik continued to speak passionately about systemic racism in sports. He shared stories of other athletes who had faced similar challenges, his words striking a chord with the audience. Malik could see heads nodding in agreement, a sense of solidarity building in the room. As the hearing continued, Malik felt an overwhelming sense of empowerment. Each testimony was a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. The presence of his coach and the support of athletes in the room reinforced his belief that they were all part of something bigger, a movement against discrimination that extended beyond the confines of a racetrack. After several hours of testimony, the hearing finally adjourned. Judge Parker called for a recess, promising a ruling would be made soon. As the audience dispersed, Malik felt a mix of relief and anxiety. They had presented their case, but he knew that the outcome could go either way. Mr. Davis gathered Malik and the other supporters outside the courthouse. You all did an incredible job today, he said, a smile breaking through his normally serious demeanor. But now we have to wait. Regardless of the decision, remember that you've already made an impact. Malik nodded, grateful for his coach's guidance. Thank you for believing in me, coach. I couldn't have done this without you. Believe in yourself, Malik, Mr. Davis replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. You have the strength to overcome this, no matter the outcome. As they left the courthouse, Malik felt a sense of camaraderie with his fellow athletes. They shared stories, laughter, and hopes for the future, all while recognizing the battle they had faced together. The journey had strengthened their bonds, and Malik was grateful for their support. In the following days, the anticipation for the ruling hung heavily in the air. Malik found solace in running, channeling his emotions into his training sessions. Each lap around the track felt like a reaffirmation of his resolve. He pushed himself harder, envisioning the moment he would cross the finish line, not just in the race, but in this battle for justice. Finally, the day of the ruling arrived. Malik and Mr. Davis stood outside the courthouse once more, surrounded by supporters and reporters. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, and Malik felt his heart pounding in his chest. As Judge Parker emerged, silence fell over the crowd. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I have reached a decision regarding the disqualification of Malik Johnson. Malik held his breath, praying for justice. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed down. He could feel the weight of anticipation pressing on him. Based on the testimonies and the lack of substantial evidence for the disqualification, I am reversing the referee's decision, Judge Parker declared. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Malik felt a wave of relief wash over him. He glanced at Mr. Davis, whose eyes sparkled with pride. You did it, Malik, he exclaimed, enveloping him in a warm embrace. In that moment, Malik understood that this victory was not just his own. It was a triumph for all those who had ever faced discrimination, a testament to the strength of unity and resilience. As he stood surrounded by his supporters, Malik felt the power of their collective voice echoing in his heart, a reminder that together they could challenge injustice and strive for a brighter future. With a renewed sense of purpose, Malik looked ahead, knowing that the road to change was still long and fraught with challenges. But he was ready to face it, not just as an athlete, but as a champion for those who needed a voice in the fight against discrimination. The battle may have begun on the track, but it would continue far beyond, and Malik was determined to run the race until justice prevailed. The courthouse buzzed with energy as the day of Malik's hearing finally arrived. The halls were filled with a mixture of anxious supporters, curious onlookers, and journalists eager to cover a story that had captivated the community. Malik felt a surge of adrenaline as he walked alongside Mr. Davis, ready to confront the reality of what had happened. This was not just about a race anymore. It was about justice, equality, and the right to be treated fairly in every aspect of life. "Are you ready, Malik?" Mr. Davis asked, his voice steady yet encouraging. He could sense the tension radiating off Malik, who was adjusting his tie for the umpteenth time. "I think so," Malik replied, though the knot in his stomach suggested otherwise. "I just want to make sure they understand." "They will," Mr. Davis assured him. "You have a powerful story to tell, and the truth is on your side. Just remember, we're here to expose the bias that exists, not just for you, but for every athlete who has faced discrimination." As they approached the courtroom, Malik took a deep breath, absorbing the significance of the moment. The room was filled with supporters, friends, fellow athletes, and family members who had come to stand by his side. Malik's mother sat in the front row, her expression a mix of pride and anxiety. He caught her eye, and she smiled, offering him a small nod of encouragement. The atmosphere was tense as Judge Parker entered the room, her presence commanding immediate respect. She took her seat at the bench, adjusted her glasses, and called the session to order. "We are here today to address the disqualification of Malik Johnson from the regional track competition. Let's proceed with the testimonies." The hearing began with Malik sitting quietly, watching as the officials and referees entered the room. He could see Mr. Collins, the referee who had disqualified him, looking tense and defensive. Malik felt a surge of anger rise within him, but quickly reminded himself of the importance of remaining calm. The first witness called was Sarah, the sprinter who had spoken out in support of Malik. As she took the stand, Malik felt a sense of solidarity wash over him. She was fighting for him, just as he was fighting for her. "Sarah, can you describe what you witnessed during the race?" Judge Parker asked. "Absolutely," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "I was in the lane next to Malik's, and I clearly saw him run a clean race. He never stepped out of his lane. The referee's decision was unjust and seemed biased." As she spoke, Malik felt a rush of gratitude. Sarah's courage to stand up for the truth gave him hope. He knew that her words would resonate with others in the room, emphasizing the larger issue at play. Next, several other athletes and coaches took the stand, sharing their observations and experiences. One by one, they recounted their own stories of bias, creating a chorus of voices calling for change. Malik listened intently, their testimonies weaving together a narrative that highlighted the systemic issues within sports. "Malik, can you tell us how this disqualification affected you personally?" Mr. Davis prompted as Malik took the stand. Malik's heart raced, but he focused on his breathing. "This disqualification has been devastating," he began. "I've trained my entire life for this moment, and in an instant, it was taken away from me. But it's more than just my race. It's about the message it sends to other young athletes who might face similar challenges. We deserve to compete without fear of being judged unfairly." The room was silent as his words hung in the air. Malik could see the impact of his testimony reflected in the faces of those present. He was no longer just a disqualified athlete. He was a voice for change. As the hearing continued, Mr. Collins was called back to the stand. Malik felt his heart pound as he prepared for the confrontation. This was his opportunity to challenge the referee's authority directly. "Mr. Collins, you stated that you believed Malik stepped out of his lane." Mr. Davis began, his tone firm. "Can you provide any evidence to support your claim?" "I stand by my decision. I saw what I saw," Collins replied, but Malik could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "You mean to tell me that your judgment alone is enough to disqualify an athlete without any video footage or witnesses to corroborate your claim?" Mr. Davis pressed. The referee shifted uncomfortably, and Malik felt a surge of confidence. "There's a pattern here, isn't there?" Malik interjected, looking directly at Collins. You may have made a judgment call, but your decision affects real lives. It's not just about rules, it's about fairness. The tension in the courtroom escalated as Malik spoke, his words resonating with truth. Collins stumbled over his response, unable to provide a satisfactory answer. Malik knew he had struck a chord. The hearing continued, with both sides presenting their arguments. Malik could feel the momentum shifting in their favor, but he knew that the final decision rested in the hands of Judge Parker. As the hours dragged on, Malik remained focused, channeling his emotions into a passionate plea for justice. Finally, the time came for closing statements. Mr. Davis stood up, his voice strong and unwavering. Your Honor, we have seen the evidence presented today. This case is not merely about the disqualification of one athlete, it's about recognizing the systemic bias that exists within our sporting institutions. Malik Johnson is not alone in this fight. He represents countless athletes who have been marginalized and judged unfairly. We urge you to consider the impact of this ruling, not just on Malik, but on future generations of athletes. Malik felt a surge of hope as Mr. Davis finished his statement. He had done everything he could, and now it was up to Judge Parker to make a decision. As the hearing adjourned, Malik and his supporters gathered in the hallway, emotions running high. The tension was palpable, but there was also a sense of camaraderie that buoyed their spirits. Malik felt grateful for the support of his coach and friends who had stood by him through this ordeal. Whatever happens, Malik, we're proud of you, Sarah said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Yeah, you've shown incredible strength, another athlete chimed in. This fight is just as much yours as it is ours. Malik smiled, feeling a sense of belonging he had longed for. They were all in this together, and their shared experiences united them in a powerful way. As the days turned into weeks, anticipation for the ruling continued to build. Malik poured himself into his training, each lap around the track serving as a reminder of his resilience. He felt the weight of his responsibility as a representative of change, and he was determined to keep pushing forward. Finally, the day arrived when Judge Parker would announce her decision. The atmosphere outside the courthouse was electric with anticipation. Malik stood with his mother, Mr. Davis, and a group of supporters, their energy infectious. When Judge Parker emerged, silence fell over the crowd. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I have reached a decision regarding the disqualification of Malik Johnson, she announced. Malik held his breath, hoping for justice. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed down. Based on the testimonies and the lack of substantial evidence for the disqualification, I am reversing the referee's decision. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Malik felt a wave of relief wash over him. He glanced at Mr. Davis, whose eyes sparkled with pride. You did it, Malik, he exclaimed, enveloping him in a warm embrace. In that moment, Malik understood that this victory was not just his own. It was a triumph for all those who had ever faced discrimination, a testament to the strength of unity and resilience. As he stood surrounded by his supporters, Malik felt the power of their collective voice echoing in his heart, a reminder that together they could challenge injustice and strive for a brighter future. With a renewed sense of purpose, Malik looked ahead, knowing that the road to change was still long and fraught with challenges. But he was ready to face it, not just as an athlete, but as a champion for those who needed a voice in the fight against discrimination. The battle may have begun on the track, but it would continue far beyond, and Malik was determined to run the race until justice prevailed. The weeks following the ruling felt surreal for Malik. With the judge's decision reversing his disqualification, he had not only reclaimed his place in the track community, but had also become a symbol of resistance against racial bias in sports. His story had sparked a conversation that rippled through the community, drawing attention to the systemic issues that many had faced but few had dared to challenge. As Malik returned to the track, the atmosphere felt different. His teammates and fellow competitors greeted him with renewed respect, recognizing the courage it had taken for him to stand up against injustice. He could feel the energy shift around him. He was no longer just another athlete competing for a title. He was an advocate for change, and he was determined to use his voice for those who had been silenced. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Malik met with Mr. Davis for a training session. The air was filled with the sounds of sneakers hitting the track, laughter, and the distant cheer of other athletes. It felt good to be back, to feel the familiar rhythm of running beneath his feet. "Ready for another round, champ?" Mr. Davis called out, his voice booming across the field. Malik grinned, stretching his legs and feeling the anticipation build within him. "Always ready, coach." As they began their warm-up, Malik couldn't help but reflect on everything that had transpired. The challenges he had faced were not just personal, but indicative of a larger struggle within the sports world. He had received messages from athletes across the country sharing their own stories of discrimination and expressing gratitude for his courage. Malik realized that his fight had become a movement, one that had the potential to create real change. "Malik, I'm proud of you," Mr. Davis said, breaking him from his thoughts. "You've shown incredible strength through this entire process. But this is just the beginning. We need to continue this momentum." "What do you mean?" Malik asked, his brow furrowed. "Your story has the power to influence others. Let's work on a campaign to raise awareness about racial bias in sports. We can partner with local schools and organizations to educate athletes and coaches about these issues." Malik's eyes widened with excitement. "I'd love that. If we can help even one person see the truth, it'll be worth it." They spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming ideas, planning events, and mapping out strategies to reach out to schools and communities. Malik felt invigorated, the prospect of being a voice for change filling him with purpose. As the campaign took shape, Malik and Mr. Davis organized workshops, discussions, and community events. They invited guest speakers, former athletes who had faced discrimination, and civil rights activists who had fought for justice. Each event drew larger crowds, igniting conversations about bias in sports and the importance of equality. Malik felt a sense of fulfillment with every workshop they conducted, seeing the impact of their efforts firsthand. The community began to rally around their cause, and he was inspired by the support from parents, coaches, and athletes alike. They were all ready to confront the uncomfortable truths that had lingered in the shadows for far too long. As the months went by, Malik's story continued to gain traction in the media. Articles and interviews spotlighted his journey, bringing attention not just to his disqualification, but to the systemic issues that plagued sports at every level. The coverage helped spread their message further, drawing in supporters from across the country. However, the fight was not without challenges. Some critics emerged, dismissing Malik's claims and suggesting that he was merely seeking attention. Malik faced backlash online and in person, but he refused to let the negativity deter him. With Mr. Davis by his side, he stood firm, knowing that the truth was on his side. "Every great movement faces opposition, Malik," Mr. Davis reminded him during a particularly difficult week. "Stay focused on your mission. The resistance you're facing is just proof that you're making an impact." Malik took those words to heart, using the criticism as fuel for his passion. He became more determined than ever to amplify his voice and the voices of others who had been marginalized. As their campaign gained momentum, they were invited to speak at a national sports conference, a significant opportunity to reach a wider audience and advocate for change on a larger scale. Malik stood before a packed auditorium, his heart pounding with excitement and nerves. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he also felt empowered by the support of those who had come to hear his story. "Thank you all for being here today," Malik began, his voice steady. "I'm here not just to talk about my experience, but to highlight a larger issue that affects countless athletes across our nation. We must confront the biases that exist in our sports systems and ensure that every athlete, regardless of their background, has a fair chance to compete." As he spoke, he could see nods of agreement from the audience, the collective energy growing as he shared his journey and the stories of others who had faced discrimination. He urged those in attendance to advocate for change within their own communities, to challenge the status quo, and to create inclusive environments for all athletes. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and Malik felt a rush of emotion wash over him. He had done it. He had transformed his pain into a powerful message of hope and resilience. This was the culmination of all the hard work and determination, and he knew it was only the beginning. After the conference, Malik received numerous messages of support from fellow athletes, coaches, and advocates. They expressed gratitude for his courage and commitment to making a difference. Malik felt overwhelmed by the response, realizing that his journey had inspired many to confront their own challenges and take a stand for justice. As the year drew to a close, Malik reflected on how far he had come. The fight against discrimination was ongoing, but he was more determined than ever to see it through. He continued training and competing, his passion for running stronger than ever. With each race, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he was not just running for himself, but for everyone who had ever faced adversity in the pursuit of their dreams. One evening, as Malik stood on the track under the glow of the setting sun, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had transformed a moment of injustice into a movement for change, and he was ready to continue fighting for what was right. "Ready for another lap?" Mr. Davis called out, breaking Malik from his thoughts. "Always," Malik replied, a smile spreading across his face. As he took off down the track, Malik felt the wind rush past him, a reminder of the freedom he had fought for. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and opportunities to make a difference, but he was ready to embrace it all. The race for justice would continue, and with every step he took, Malik knew he was not alone. He had the support of his community, the love of his family, and the unwavering belief in a brighter future. This was his moment to shine, and he was determined to run with all of his heart. As he crossed the finish line, Malik raised his arms in triumph, a symbol of hope for all those who had fought alongside him. The race for equality was far from over, but he was ready to lead the charge, knowing that together they could change the world, one lap at a time. And with that promise in his heart, Malik Johnson continued his journey, not just as an athlete, but as a champion of justice, committed to running towards a future where every athlete could compete freely and fairly, unburdened by the chains of prejudice. Hey everyone! We hope you enjoyed this powerful story about resilience, justice, and the fight against discrimination in sports. Malik's journey reminds us that standing up for what's right can inspire change for many. If you found this video meaningful, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to share it with your friends and family to spread the message even further. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest content. Thank you for being part of our community. Together, we can continue to champion justice and equality in every aspect of life. Until next time, keep running towards your dreams.